Hi, and welcome to another episode of Walleye Chronicles, where I bring you guys in here and have a conversation with how fishing got you started in your life and how you use fishing every day. Today, I have Zach Stadler with me today. Zach, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad. So tell me, how was growing up? Were you rich, poor? How'd that kind of start? What's your baseline?
So I started out fishing with my dad. Always, we lived in Green Bay,
Okay.
in Swamico area, my whole life. So I spent my whole childhood in the summers. You know, we'd go out, and Dad would say the night before, "Hey, you want to go walleye fishing in the morning?" It's 8-year-old, 6-year-old kid, all jacked up to go fishing.
Yep.
So I have to thank a lot to my dad for how much he took me out as a kid. You know, just introducing me to the outdoors and showing me the walleye fishing. Back then, all we did was troll.
Okay.
So that was, you set your crawler harnesses out 35 feet back behind the board, and you trolled 1 mile an hour. And that's what we did. And it took me, I think I was like 14 or 15, and I got what you would say burnt out of the trolling.
Yep.
But that's when I really got into the muskie world too. So I started doing up north muskie fishing, Green Bay muskie fishing. And at that age, 14, that was around 2010, give or take, that the heydays of Green Bay muskies.
Yep.
I mean, you go out there muskie fishing, you would, you'd see someone netting a muskie at all times. So Green Bay was just my heaven for me.
Yep.
For muskie fishing and walleye fishing. So I grew up fishing Green Bay my whole life. Spring we were out in the rivers chasing the walleye runs. Yep. Summer we were out chasing the eaters. Fall we would go out try for trophies, but we also did a lot of deer hunting. So the fall fishing was something I had to pick up later on, because we were big deer hunters.
Yep.
So, September rolled around, October rolled around, fishing stuff got put away pretty much for the most part. And
garage got changed over.
Yep. And it was all hunting. But no, I grew up fishing walleyes and muskies out in Green Bay since a little kid. I mean, I can remember at 6 years old going out there and catching limits of walleyes, and then that was the heyday of Green Bay. It didn't matter. You could go anywhere and catch a limit of walleyes back then. But now it's gotten a little tougher, but it's now I've gotten away from the trolling aspect a little bit, and I got into more of the casting, snap jigging. And like this year, I can proudly say I have ran one walleye trolling trip all year.
Oh.
Otherwise, it's all been casting and snap jigging for walleyes.
Was that because they didn't have the talent to do it, or didn't have the skill to do it, or just they wanted to, that was the kind of fishing that was available that day, or?
That was more, it was more the amount of people.
Okay.
And the clientele I had. I knew what the clientele I had. They weren't experienced fishermen.
Gotcha.
So we went with that. But back in the day when I grew up, trolling was the only option. The gobies weren't prevalent like they are now. Now with how prevalent the gobies are in Green Bay, I think it's better to snap jig and mimic those gobies than to do anything else.
I gotcha. So do you remember your first fish you caught?
Or
what your first memory of a
so this is gonna get a lot of walleye fishermen laughing, but my first memory of a fish I caught, we were trolling. It was me, my dad, and my mom. We were out trolling on Green Bay. We were trolling original floating Rapalas.
Okay.
It was the orange color, that orange. And we were trolling out on the East Shore Humps by Vincent's there.
Okay.
And we're trolling. We had 6 rods out only. It was the 3 of us, but we only had 6 rods out. And I remember my dad was driving the boat and kind of navigating through a couple other boats. My mom was sitting there just relaxing. I was in the back of the boat. I mean, when we were trolling when I was a kid, I watched those planer boards. If they moved one little bit, you're grabbing a rod. And I remember I was looking at the one side and there was 3. I looked on the other side, there was 3. I looked back on the other side and there was only 2. And I was like, well, that's weird. So I grabbed the rod and I brought it in, and it was around a 28, 30-pound sheephead.
Oh.
So that was one of my first.
Started.
Yeah. It took me forever to get it in because it sunk the board. And I was a little kid trying to reel that thing in. But yeah, that was one of my fondest memories of fishing and it was a sheephead.
Right.
But it was just, a little kid, and all of a sudden you just watch that board disappear like a bobber.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
When you're young too, that's what you think planer boards are just going to do. They're just going
Right.
to sink. And when it did that, I told my dad my planer board was gone, and he's like, okay, we thought we snagged on bottom or something, but no, it was just a big sheephead. I remember that one. Or there was times too when I remember when I was starting to get more into the casting aspect, we'd be trolling, me, my dad, and my brother would be out there trolling, and they'd be trolling. We'd be running 6 lines again, because we commonly ran 6 lines in the boat just for more control.
Yep.
When I was younger, and I'd be standing in the front of the boat throwing the original thunder stick, deep diver, and I remember the one day I caught like 3 walleyes just casting in front of the boat, cranking it in as fast as you can, doing everything possibly wrong.
Yep.
Reeling a crankbait in the spring, cranking it as fast as you can, and ended up catching like 3 the one day doing that. So it was, there's just little memories like that with the family.
So when did you first start to fish by yourself? Was it with buddies, in high school? Did you kind of, grow up? So when did that kind of start with your own fishing time?
So in high school, I still fished with my dad quite a bit in high school. But yeah, once I turned 16, my dad made me hook up we had a little single axle trailer, and I had a truck, and he's like, okay, you got to back this up and down the driveway 6 times without having to drive it forward, and then you can take the boat out. Oh. But so my dad made me prove that I could back the boat in, because that was one thing my dad always drove my dad insane, was guys at the boat landing that didn't know how to back up their trailers. So I started in high school. I really started fishing with buddies too, because I got into with groups of buddies that had the same craziness about fishing that I have. Mm-hmm. So we would go out and get done with school, and we'd go hook up to the boat and go out there for a couple hours. And, it was between sports and fishing. I mean, I was crazy about fishing. So any waking moment I could fish, shore fishing even, we'd go out and shore fish. But yeah, it was high school. I would say we really started, even before high school, before we could start driving, we were biking everywhere and going fishing by bike, now. And then once we got the vehicles, it really opened everything up for us. We would go all over the place.
Wow. What was the first boat?
The first boat, my dad's first boat that I was driving was a 2006 Ranger 620.
He let you go on your own.
Yep. I proved to him that I could do it. And actually, the funny thing is, my first ever trip with the boat had the Ranger 620, and I took it to the Wisconsin River over by Wausau kind of area. And it was in this really steep landing, and my buddy was putting it on the trailer, and I backed the truck in and snapped the prop off the trolling motor. First ever trip. And luckily my dad was fit to be tied when I got home. Kid first time out, breaks the trolling motor. Then we went there that same weekend, and he did the same thing because the landing was so steep. So I got a little pressure lifted off me.
So what was it like driving over there with the boat for the first time? Was like the world open up for you? Like life's good?
It was, so all my buddies, yes, it opened up for them. It was world's good. We got the freedom and all that. Me, I was like a cat that just ate a thumbful of tacks because I was nervous driving my dad's boat. This is my dad's first high-end boat and that. So he was nice enough to let us even borrow it. Right. And yeah, I was nervous. I was excited that I had the freedom, but I was also very nervous driving with that boat and all that, everything, If it was a 65 mile an hour speed limit, I was going 60, 65. There was no going over the speeder. It was just everything. But yeah, it opened a lot of opportunities and opened up more fishing and more spots for me. Mm-hmm. Stuff that my dad, he's very old school. Yep. If something's not broke, why try to fix it? So we'd always go to the same spots and fish the same stuff. And if we didn't catch them, I guess the fish aren't biting today. Where I went out and I was doing new stuff, trying new areas, and I just opened the door for me to learn a lot more new areas.
Did you ever try to pull him into the new stuff and try to get him?
So it took a long time to get my dad to try the new things. Mm-hmm. And then the one day we always go for his birthday. We always go fishing now. I don't book a trip on his birthday. And he and I went out, and I told him the first time he ever went snap jigging, I said, we're going snap jigging.
All right.
He's like, okay, we're not going to catch anything, not believe. And he caught 5 in the first hour, his 5 in the first hour. And ever since then, I think I've seen him put a trolling rod out one time since that date. So it really opened his eyes for him to see the new things. But he's one of those guys that you almost have to drag him kicking and screaming. Yep.
Yeah.
But once he sees it, he really loves it. So now he's all in on the snap jigging and all that. So yeah, I would drag him out. You'd get on a hot bite somewhere, and it's like, okay, this is the thing. This is the time to show him.
Yeah.
Hey,
oh yeah. I mean, it helps that way too.
Yeah. It's like that way he can see it. So when it is a slow bite, he can see, okay, it's just a slow bite. It's not the technique.
Did you guys ever have any arguments in the boat?
Oh, all the time. When me, my dad, and my brother would go fishing, there was a lot of arguments because we were all 3 of us are hard-headed.
Right.
And I was like, well, we need to do this. Yeah. And my brother said we need to do this. And my dad would say, well, we need to do this. Well, when we were younger, we probably should have listened to my dad a little bit more. I'll be the first to admit it. At some points, we should have listened to my dad more. He probably knew a little bit more. But yeah, there was plenty of arguments in the boat, just 3 hard-headed guys trying to say what we need to do. So
nonstop bickering.
Oh yeah. But then when it would work for one of us, and the other 2 would not hear the end of it.
Right.
Oh.
So what was your first boat?
My first boat was I had my first boat. I bought that Ranger for my dad.
Okay.
And then I got to a Nitro ZV21. Then I went now into another Nitro ZV21. Got it last year.
Okay.
So I've had 2 Nitros now, the ZV21s.
That's nice.
Yep.
What was your first lure you remember buying growing up?
First lure I ever remember buying was a number 5 Mepps muskie killer. And we were going muskie fishing, and it was early on, and I just was like, oh, I'm going to get a bucktail for this thing. I'm going fishing with my uncles and dad and all them. So I bought a Mepps muskie killer number 5. And I remember we were fishing on a lake up north and bringing that thing in. And I had about, at the time, probably a 42 incher. But I was a little kid. That was still when my dad, he would cast my rod out. And he'd run up, cast his rod out, bring his bait in, set his rod down, go back, cast mine out because I didn't know how to cast a bait caster yet. So my dad was making twice as many casts as the average person. But I remember I had like a 42 incher follow me in on that trip. And I remember I reeled the rod up and I saw that fish, pulled that bait out of the water, hooked the bait up to the rod, set it down, and the fish was too big. I was so young. I was like, that fish is too big. I set it down and didn't fish anymore for the rest of the day.
Wow. So when did so you always fish muskies as a kid too as well?
Yep. I started out muskie fishing. I caught my first one ever on Pelican Lake up in Rylander.
Okay.
On a topwater.
Oh, that must have been awesome.
Yeah, 49 incher. I can still remember that one. And ever since that day, muskie and walleye have been hooked. Getting into the smallmouth quite a bit now too. They're a riot. So
I mean, growing up in Green Bay, you literally are at the center of the universe for smallmouth, muskies, and walleyes.
I have a bunch of buddies that always want to go up to Canada, and they're like, "Hey, you want to go to Canada with us?" And I'm like, "Nope."
Right.
Why? Why would I go up to Canada, drive 12 hours to see some scenery? Is about the only thing that I can see. I mean, Green Bay is, in my opinion, the best fishery in the world. All in all, best fishery in the world. I mean, there's St. Clair might be the only one that might rival. I
suppose. Yep.
But the walleye because of the walleye fishing, the muskie fishing, and then the smallmouth fishing. But I still think Green Bay's smallmouth fishing is better than St. Clair's smallmouth fishing.
I would think the walleyes are probably the spring bite and that whole aura around the spring in De Pere is magical.
Well, and that's the thing is everyone just thinks of De Pere. There is.
Oh yeah, you're okay. Okay, yep, you got me. Yeah, all the other inlets.
There's way better fishing. Tell you what, I only fish the Fox River until I can't fish when I can't fish anywhere else.
I gotcha.
As soon as I can fish other places, that fox is in the rearview mirror. There's so many places. That's the thing too, is there's a lot of things that are, they say there's nothing secret anymore about Green Bay. There's still a lot of things that aren't known about, like De Pere.
Yeah.
And there's some spots that it just will blow your mind when you go out there and fish
Right.
it.
I mean, it's a massive, massive amount of water that you have to.
Yeah, and that is one of the hardest parts about guiding it full time is, I mean, they can have a bite on either shore, and well, that could be 70 miles apart,
Right.
or the two bites are going really good.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there's a lot of spots that you can go. It's nice, and it's a double-edged sword. It's a positive and a negative. Well, you go out fishing, and your one bite that's been red hot dies.
Mm-hmm.
Usually within 20 miles of you, there's 6 or 7 other spots you can hit and make a meat run out of walleye fishing. It's like, oh, we might not catch a limit today, but we can go out and still get, if I have 4 guys, we can get 8, 10 walleyes.
Right.
People don't realize Green Bay walleye is an 18-inch Green Bay walleye. It takes a lot for a person to eat an 18-inch Green Bay walleye.
Yeah,
so
they're a little different.
yeah, so we go out there and we can make a meat run and, hit spot, and catch, 3 or 4 walleyes off each spot. Well, if I hit 6 spots.
So was there a time when you were fishing younger that you realized that you wanted to do something in fishing?
Yeah, so when I was a little kid, this was always my dream.
To be a guide?
Yep, to be a hunting and fishing guide. And I wanted to guide, deer or elk or something like that in the fall, and then fish in the spring and summer. Well, I kind of realized that with where I'm at, fishing's the name of the game. So that's why I guide majority of the year. I spent guiding fishing. I do fall duck hunts too. So that is nice, which the duck hunt in Green Bay is unbelievable too. But I've always wanted to be like I remember I can still find it. I have a little book, Your Dream Job, and it's being a hunting/fishing guide is written in there. And that was first grade. So that's been a dream of mine my whole life. And, when you're younger, you don't realize all the work that goes into it actually, and all the, sleepless nights and all that stuff. But it's always been a dream, and it's still a dream. Still love it every day. Wake up and love what I do. But
so do you remember your first guide trip?
I do remember my first guide trip actually.
Did it go well?
We ended up catching, there was 3 guys, we ended up catching 12 walleyes. So it was a really good trip.
Yep.
But I'll tell you what, I didn't sleep a wink the night before that guide trip. I was, because I went in fully invested. I went in full time right off the get-go.
Okay.
I didn't
You didn't tiptoe, you went right in.
Yeah, I went right in because my thinking was, if you don't go right in right away, you're probably never going to go in.
Right, you're going to be half and half.
Yep, you're going to have a nice steady job and I'm kind of glad I didn't, because if I would have went in right away with a steady job, I don't know how you'd go, okay, I got a steady job, I got a guaranteed money here. Mm-hmm. If I go in full time, I don't have any guaranteed money.
Right.
Because there's nothing for a guy to call you and say, hey, I can't make it.
Right.
So, and that's what actually happened to me on Friday today. I got a phone call, the guy can't make it now on Friday, but I went full in, and it was tough the first year. You got to build that clientele base up. You got to build all your advertisement up. So it was tough that first year, but yeah, I remember my first guide trip. I was nervous, really nervous, but that morning I remember just go out and do what you do always. And it went smooth after that. Every guide trip has been real smooth. It's just, you got to treat it as, it's just another day of fishing, Right. I actually I'm more nervous when I go fish a few tournaments every year than I am with a guide trip, which I shouldn't be. I should just treat it as it's just another day of fishing. Every day is tournament day for me.
That's true.
Everyone says, oh, well, if you're pre-fishing, you don't have to catch them and all that. Every day I got to try to get my clients to catch them. The best fish they can catch and the most fish they can catch. So every day is tournament day for me. I kind of look at it now. So
what species is easier, or would you rather guide musky walleyes or smallmouth?
So
Or
honestly,
what's your level of?
it always was musky, walleye, smallmouth before when I first started guiding, because I didn't guide smallmouth that much. I didn't fish smallmouth that much. And then it went musky, smallmouth, walleye. And now it's starting to get where that smallmouth is starting to take over, even over musky. I love going out. You get the challenge of the smallmouth.
Right.
Everyone thinks that smallmouth fishing, bass fishing's easy. And they can be a challenge. I just love figuring out that puzzle, trying to figure out that puzzle every day. What's going to make them trigger?
And there are some massive fish up there.
Oh, my biggest actually I ever caught, I had an afternoon trip, and I had been fishing up by like Gills Rock area, northern Door County area. And they were people from Swamico, and all they wanted to go up, all the further they wanted to go up was Little Sturgeon. I was like, well, I'm going to go see out. It was an afternoon trip. So I'm like, I'm in the morning. I'm going to go see what's swimming around in Little Sturgeon. I kind of went up north because the bass were getting into the point of where they're starting to bed. So I'm like, with trips, I'm going to just try to stay up to the north, not target the bedded fish, which that's a whole nother subject, bedded fish. But I went there and I was like, I'm going to go try it, and saw this fish swimming across the sand spot when I was just driving around. I was just driving around. I had a rod in my hand, but I wasn't even fishing. And I saw this one. I was like, oh, that's a nice one. Took my bait, threw it out in front of it. And all of a sudden I watched that fish turn and go right to my bait, which never happens. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm like, it might eat it. And all of a sudden, boom, hits it, set the hook. I'm like, well, it ate it, and it's a good one. And it jumped by the boat, got in, netted it. I'm sitting there by myself, not a boat around me. I'm looking at it. I go, oh, it's definitely over 6. It's probably close to 7. Put it on the scale. It was 8.25 pounds.
Wow.
Then all of a sudden I was like, shit, I'm by myself. I got no one here. I'm like, how? So I took a picture of it on the scale and I put it in my live well for a second because I was trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I had the live well running. So I was like, well, I want to make sure this fish is alive, stays alive, because this is the fish you want to keep. This is the best genetics. And I'm like, looking, and there's no one close to me. I was like, well, I don't know what I'm even going to do. I was like, well, maybe I'll run back to the landing, see if there's someone there that can snap a picture for me quick, and then I'll run this fish back over here and let it go. And right as I was starting to get stuff put away to run, all of a sudden I see a boat come around the little point right by me. Waved him down. He came over by me and snapped a picture for me. And it was, you couldn't ask for anything better. So then when my clients get there, I was like, this is swimming around out here, fish like this. So we ended up catching it. I had, it was a dad and 2 sons, and each son caught one that was low or upper 5s.
Wow.
That day, dad caught a 6.2, and then one of the boys caught a 52-inch muskie too.
That's not
Casting
bad
for
day.
bat. No. So I was like, well, we didn't get our 8. They didn't get an 8.25, but
Right, but to them, it's 6 pounds, 5 pounds. That's a massive.
yeah,
smallmouth.
that's a 5-pound smallmouth is a big smallmouth.
Yeah.
You look at the tournaments out there, you need 25 pounds to even be in
That's true.
contention.
Yeah, I think the largest one I've caught is just shy of 7 pounds, and I was in absolute awe.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I
know what to do.
can't believe how short the fish are out there.
Right?
Too. If
They really are footballs. They really are footballs.
That big one I caught was only 22.5 inches long, but it had like a 20-some inch girth.
That's crazy.
It was just one of those freak fish.
Right. So, have you ever had your guiding world? Have you ever had any terrible days?
Oh, we've had plenty of terrible days. I've had terrible clients, and I've had terrible, just.
You never yell at your clients like the guy down in Florida?
No,
you never freak out and scream at them or nothing like that?
No, I've never had that. I've had clients where I've gotten upset with, and they knew I was upset with them. And it was, partly I'll take full responsibility. I shouldn't. You got to be a little more professional, but for the most part, I've never got into it, or I've never argued with a client, never gotten in a fight with a client, but I've had clients that have breaking rods before doing something, and you're frustrated, and they can tell in your tone that you're frustrated, but you just say, it is what it is. We'll figure it out, kind of thing. I'll never charge someone for a rod unless I see them do something that's just okay, you're going to get,
Paying for that.
or I've had it too where I get worked up when I take it hard when the fishing can be tough.
Okay.
Because there's days that, there's days that the fish just don't bite.
Yeah, you don't get to pick. You're picking your days, but you don't get to pick the bite.
Yeah. So there's and I take it hard because it's like, I look at it, if I'm with this guy, I'm paying this guy, I want to catch fish. I can't guarantee fish. And I booked guides before too. Like if I go on a trip and I'll book a guide and we might not catch that many fish. And I tell and every guide is the same that I've always been with is the same as me. If we're not catching fish, that guide is worked up. He's trying to do his best. He's everything and it's just not working out. It's like, it gets frustrating. That part gets frustrating, but no, for the most part, I've always had really good clients. Always fishing is, there's good days and bad days with fishing, just fishing in general. The days I hate the worst are like if you have to troll for walleyes or troll for muskies and the weeds are really bad.
Oh,
you can be on a million fish, but if those weeds are bad, there's nothing you can do.
You spend all day.
Like yesterday, I was out muskie trolling and the weeds were horrible. As soon as I'd click that rod off, that board would go back because it was full of weeds. And it's just like, I sat in the back of the boat and pulled the rods for 5 hours straight. Just reeled in, pulled rods, reeled and reset, and just constantly did it. And it was unless you set your bait down, when you clicked it off, it was right in front of a muskie. You ain't gonna catch them. So
I suppose you got weather too. It get pretty rough up there.
Oh
so.
yeah, I've had to cancel 3 days, I think, or 4 days total in my thing because of wind. There's a lot of times we can fish different areas, but I know. It's like, it's a northeast wind. We can't, what I wanted to fish, we can't fish anymore. But there's spots I can go and usually there's fish at. But there's been a few times where it was, this is the bite.
Yep.
This is it. If we want to catch fish, we got to be here. And there'll be a northeast wind blowing at 25 miles per hour. And I'll call the guys. I'm like, hey, let's either reschedule or we're going to have to cancel because there's going to be 5-footers, 6-footers rolling out there. I just insurance wise and liability wise, I can't take you guys out there. I wouldn't go out there and fish. Me and my buddies wouldn't go out there and fish. That's the thing too, is a lot of people always ask me, it's like, what would you do? And I'll be like, I wouldn't be out here.
Right.
But.
So do your clients ever let you pick what to do? Or they just want to come fishing? Do you have anything like that? It was like, hey.
So I've had quite a few clients that'll say, well, let's go for whatever's biting. And I'll be like, okay, well, this is biting the best. If you want, I'll always tell them, it's like, hey, are you looking to keep fish? Or are you just looking to go have a good time, catch fish? You don't care. Because if that's the case, like that, right now, if that's the case, they're not looking to keep fish. They're just looking out to go out and have a good time, hang out, joke around, drive around in the boat and see if we can catch a fish or two. Then I'd put the muskie in because there is something about it. When you net a big 50-inch muskie, everyone in the boat is just starstruck.
I bet they go crazy.
But if they want to keep fish, then I always say, hey, let's go do walleyes. The walleyes aren't going. I'll see if I can find a perch bite going because sometimes you can find few perch bites. Green Bay perch fishing is actually starting to get back to being pretty good. It was a little tougher this year compared to last year, but it's still pretty good. But yeah, I'll look at the walleye / perch if we were looking to take fish home.
So what's a day like? A guided day, a full day, what would that be like?
So what we do is
you up early?
Yep. I always like to get going right away in the morning just for the fact of doesn't matter what you fish for, smallmouth, muskie, walleye, perch, doesn't matter. There's that first 45 minutes of light is usually the best bite of the day. And just like the last 45 minutes of light is usually the best bite of the day. And so I like to get out there, hit that. And then I can know kind of too, it's like, okay, there's a bunch of fish here. They're still here. We'll stay and we'll grind these fish out the rest of the time and see what we can get. But also in that 45 minutes, if I pull up there and I can't get bites in that first 45 minutes, I'm gone out of that spot. It's like, okay, these fish aren't eating today. I'll probably come back and hit it once more if I know that they're walleyes that are down there. maybe they'll turn on a little later. But for the most part, if they don't bite in that first 45 minutes, more than likely they're not really going to bite the whole day.
That makes sense.
So I'll leave them and I'll go try a different spot and try another spot, and then I'll come back and hit those at the end of the trip. See if we can get them to go.
Yep.
You know, if we need a walleye or two left, you know, let's go see if we can get them to bite here. And I've had a lot of times where I've left and came back and it's like wildfire out there. They just
Why would we leave?
yeah, and then they just turn on. So then, you know, especially if like I have a half day and we went out, like I remember this year we went out one day and there was no fish biting in this one spot. And it was a spot that I was hour and a half, 2 hours, and I was done. Didn't matter how many people I had.
Yep.
Hour and a half, 2 hours, we were done walleye fishing. Pulled out there and the fish were there. Sat there and jigged on them for like an hour. They wouldn't bite. So I went and hit a different reef, hit a weed line, hit some weeds, hit a rock pile that I got, you know, a bunch of different spots out there. And there was like 45 minutes left in the trip. I was like, oh, let's go hit that spot one last time, see what happens. And pulled in there, and those fish were just jumping in the boat, basically. And there was 3 guys we had, but in the 45 minutes, we ended up having, I think, 9 walleyes.
Wow.
You know, they're like, oh, you know, kind of getting disappointed. And they're like, oh, it's the end of the trip. I was like, I don't think you guys realize this. They're biting this good. Now we're out here till we get 15. So I will actually, if it's been a tough day all day and all of a sudden we find a spot that they're turned on,
Yep.
I'm not going to be that guy that says, oh, 5 hours is up. Let's go. We're going to, if they're biting, we'll stay out there and we'll finish off. Yeah. Crack our limit.
So what's the most important thing in your boat to you?
I would have to say for me would probably be spot lock.
Okay.
I have the Panoptic system. That is very crucial for finding fish. Even side scan. A lot of people are once they get Panoptics, they overlook
that. But you need that to find the fish. It's a lot easier to find a fish with that than it is with getting on your trolling motor and swinging in circles.
Well, yeah, and I'll let you a little known secret on in Green Bay, which some people just overlook it, is those rock sand transition lines. Everyone kind of overlooks that for walleyes. Mm-hmm. They stack up on those transition lines, and with Panoptics, I mean, you can see it in the perspective mode.
Yep. Yeah.
But you can't see it in the forward mode. Those transition lines is clear. Mm-hmm. Where with side scan, I can float right down a transition line, just floating down.
Yeah.
Or I can spot lock, where I'm like, okay, transition, spot lock, or side scans right here. Transition line runs like this. Throw right down this line. And you have spot lock, and you got that transition line, and people can sit there and fire right down that. Right.
Do you fish with your guest?
For walleyes and smallmouth, I always ask them if they're okay with it. Walleyes, I'll usually start out fishing with them, but
just to prove that they're biting, kind of thing.
Show them the technique. I'll always show them techniques right away. Yep. But then I'll also make sure they're not biting on. If I got it where they're eating plastics really good, and they've been eating plastics really good, I'll put my clients on plastics or a jig and wrap. Yep. It's whatever's been producing the best. That's what I start my clients off with, and I start them all off with that, so that if they're going on that, they're working that bait. And I'll grab something different. I'll grab a blade bait. I'll grab something different, usually a spoon.
Try to stay ahead of the curve.
Yep. And then if I start catching them on this, it's like, okay, I'll change one guy's bait. Mm-hmm. And then he starts catching them 2 on it. Then I'll change another guy, and then, change it. Yeah, just change it through. And it gets to a point that once you figure out what they're biting on, a lot of times I don't even have time to fish.
Oh, you're just working.
I'll net a fish, unhook it,
Pictures,
get in the live well,
kind of stuff,
get the bait unhooked out of the net, and by the time that happens, another guy's got a fish hooked. So,
what's the hardest technique to teach the average person that doesn't?
Snap jigging can be tough. I would probably say that or plastics, snap jigging plastics in the spring for people, because a lot of times the reason that people struggle with it is so much is they like when you snap jig, everything else, everything you've worked, if you jig something, you drop your rod right back down, so it goes down to the bottom, and people don't follow those baits down. Well, with that's the one thing that I like about Panoptix putting in forward mode.
Yep.
I'll be sitting there and I'll watch my clients fish, and I'll turn towards their bait, and I'll see they're 6-7 feet off the bottom. I'll say, okay, guy, just let it hold your rod for a second, and then they'll feel that bait hit bottom. Yep. It's like, okay, do you feel that? I'm like, I don't want you to make a jig unless you feel that again.
So you're using Panoptix to see what they're doing. That's pretty cool.
I use Panoptix just as much to find fish as I do to watch my clients bait, to make sure that because I found out in Green Bay, if you don't work your bait right on the bottom, you catch a quarter of the amount of fish.
Yeah, if you're not touching the bottom.
Some fish will come up and eat it when it's just coming down. But for the most part, they come down and they get that bait right on the bottom. And, as everyone knows, they do the pinning it on Green Bay where you get them right underneath the chin. Yep. It's like, everyone's like, oh, you snagged him, If it was snagging, you wouldn't catch 90% of your fish in the same. I can go and point right in the same exact spot that I catch every fish. But, you do catch enough that eat it going down. But if they don't eat it going down, you're going to pin them, because they're not going to come up and just open their mouth and suck that bait in, because that bait's too heavy that we throw. We're throwing 1 ounce baits. So we catch a lot of our fish right underneath the bottom jaw, right between the gills and the bottom jaw, the beak. But yeah, that's my Panoptix. I sit there and I can coach people to make sure they feel that bait hit the bottom.
That's very clever. For the full version of this podcast, check out Fix TV. And remember, follow me on the talk at Smile and Fish and everywhere else at Matt Snell.